New York Times critic Vincent Canby said that this film looks as if it might have achieved its fairly modest goals had the people making it spent just 15 more minutes thinking about what they were doing. Jason Bailey of Flavor Wire calls it a very hard movie to hate. And Letterboxd user No Personality says, to all the naysayers and cynics, it's actually funny. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, the final episode of January, our month-long celebration of the films of Jon Dan, we decide the fate of Who's That Girl?
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. ¿Quién esta niña?
Oh, who is that girl?
Who is that girl indeed?
Dan, how's it going? Everybody, welcome to Ruined Childhoods. I have to apologize. My dogs are activated and they are squeaking on squeaky toys behind me, so that's what that is.
Yes. Welcome, Starfighters. It is Ruined Childhoods time when we listen to John's dogs play with toys.
Only on this episode.
Well, no, rarely.
So far.
It is a rare date.
I try to edit stuff out.
This is also a rare daytime recording for us.
Last minute, I've been going through a move. Things are chaotic. So we're just trying to sneak it in as we can. And here we are doing Who's That Girl on Ruined Childhoods. And we're gonna like I think that cutting to the chase is pretty appropriate for talking about this.
That's
movie.
what this movie does so frequently.
Yes,
but as we're doing that, important to note that this is our last episode of January, our celebration of direction and cinematography of Jon Dan, which he was the cinematographer on Who's That Girl. The director of it, James Foley, is probably best known as the director of 1992's Glengarry Glen Ross.
Right, yeah.
So,
right.
But Jon Dan definitely brings his style to this movie. There's chases. We've talked about how the DeBont camera cannot be restrained or contained. I'm not in that accent particularly.
Jon Dan thrives when he's outside.
When he's outside or when he can move about inside. Point of reference, Die Hard.
Right. Cinematographer on Die Hard, director for Speed and Twister, two movies that we covered, one of which was in January. Check it out a couple weeks ago. And Who's That Girl is a very fascinating, I'd call it kind of a bit of a cult classic. And I definitely remember watching it a lot when I was a kid. There were so many things that happened in this movie where I was like, oh my God, I forgot, like tricks,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was it. There were several occasions, but that was really the one where I'm like, I remember us, and particularly like I was 10 or just about 10 when that movie came out. And by the time it was on HBO, it would have been 10. But I remember like you and our brother Scott, who are younger than me, repeating that part. And it's got that silly appeal, that cartoonish appeal.
Right. Why don't we do a synopsis and then we'll really dig into this a little bit. All right, you ready, Dan?
I've been ready for days.
Sorry, I've been busy.
No, I'm sorry. You're not the only one. You're not the only one around. It's life is crazy these days. So
Life's crazy, man.
It feels like we're all metaphorically, running around in a
Rolls-Royce.
In a convertible with a tiger in a cage in the backseat and a recently freed ex-convict.
All right,
just calling the shots.
Doing the synopsis is my job, Dan. So thank you very much. Okay. On the day before his wedding to his wealthy boss's daughter, uptight attorney Loudon Trott is tasked by his future father-in-law to transport a newly paroled ex-con named Nikki Finn from prison to the bus station. What Loudon doesn't expect is that this woman is a complete wild card with ulterior motives and a love for tricks. To further complicate things, in Loudon's future mother-in-law's Rolls Royce, he is also couriering an endangered exotic feline to his wealthiest client, but it's hard to say which of Loudon's passengers is the wildest. As their antics take them all over New York City, we meet a series of colorful characters, including the two undercover cops who suspect that Nikki wasn't actually guilty and is going to lead them to the person responsible for her crimes. And you know what? They're exactly right. But what Loudon doesn't expect from Nikki's antics and his crazy day is that his fiancée is a bad fit, and Nikki just might be the round hole that fits his square peg.
Wow. What? No, just a lot of innuendo to dig in there.
You know what, Dan?
Yeah.
Sometimes doing these synopses can get kind of boring.
No, I get it, and it definitely fits.
So, all right, so this movie comes out shortly after Griffin Dunne, who plays Loudon Trott, did After Hours with Martin Scorsese, which we talked about in the last episode. And also in the last episode, you had asked me if I had seen The King of Comedy, to which I had said, no, I haven't. I corrected that. I watched it this past week, and it is a truly bizarre movie. It's definitely one of my... it's towards the top of my Martin Scorsese list, but After Hours is definitely my favorite. And you can kind of tell that, like, there is probably the idea to cast Griffin Dunne because he can do this whole, like, almost feeling like it's in real time, starting something in a pretty regular way to taking it to a very extreme by the end, and seeing the way that he performs the role along the way. And, it's when watching movies like this that take place over a short period of time where the main character goes through this, like, huge psychological change, like this life-defining day in their life. You watch these movies and it's hard to remember sometimes that, like, these aren't shot in order most of the time. So it's like to access those points of mania for him, out of order are, that's quite an accomplishment. So big ups to Griffin Dunne for his portrayal of Loudon Trott, but also in his role in After Hours, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And no coincidence that he was cast again. I mean, same studio back when that meant something. Yeah. And I mean, of course, this was not Martin Scorsese, I believe, had no involvement in Who's That Girl?
Yeah.
But Griffin Dunne's casting is pretty spot on, especially if you'd seen After Hours. Let him see, he's doing something similar. It's not quite the same. There's definitely more complexity in After Hours.
Yeah.
But he's
more
still
intrigue. Yeah.
He's still this, the square peg who's trying to, and there were a lot of these movies in the 80s. And of course, he's playing opposite Madonna, who this was the third film, I think, into her film career after Desperately Seeking Susan, which was a big success, and Shanghai Surprise, which was not. In fact, I believe Sean Penn was originally going to play opposite her in Who's That Girl, and then
I heard that he was also being considered to play one of the cops.
Maybe that was I just remember reading that they were considering him, and then Shanghai Surprise didn't work. But so you've got Madonna, who, according to all reports, was not just very involved with the production, but really wanted to learn and really wanted to take advantage of this as an opportunity to learn more about filmmaking and be much more involved. I mean, she's the one who determined the name of the film, which was not it was something. It was going to be called. What was it going to be called? Slammer?
Slammer, yeah. So the script originally, it was called Slammer, and it kind of had the very bare bones of the story And I listened to an interview with the original screenwriter who was just like, this is not the movie I wrote. It was still like a guy has to transport ex-con to bus station, things go awry kind of a story. But there was no tiger. There was none of that kind of stuff. It was,
that's such a
definitely
classic.
was added, for comedy. And also it was like once Madonna became involved, it became way more cartoonish, which literally is how the movie starts.
Which, man, just another great example of animated 80s opening credits.
Oh, gotta love them. Gotta love them.
Fantastic. And it sets up, what I love about these opening credits is they set up, they give you a lot of the exposition that later we get more detail on.
Right.
When Nikki's, because in this movie, Griffin Dunn is the Eleniac. He is the character who needs things explained to him so that we all get what's going on.
Right. And I mean, it's, even though this movie completely bombed at the box office and is not regarded as a very good movie, and maybe it's just because like I happened to watch it at the right time in my childhood where this wild character that Madonna plays, appeals to, and it's not even like Madonna as the like sex symbol that she was known to be or anything like that. This is just like this really wacky person who's very funny.
Well, and in fact, it made me think of, and I'm watching it, and by the way, I have nothing but praise for Madonna in this movie. And I too, one of the things that I was wondering about was I was like, gee, I wonder if Jon is going to have that same nostalgia factor being 5 years younger.
Oh, yeah.
I was when it was on, but like, yeah. And I don't know. It was funny because one of the reviews, as I was combing through reviews for the intro on Letterboxd, was just like, is it really good or do I just love Madonna that much? And I was kind of asking myself the same thing. I was like, is it really like, because I really enjoyed watching it. It was the first time I'd seen it in a while, but it also, as I'm watching her performance and thinking like, oh, she's really good in this, I couldn't help thinking that the persona, kind of like the public persona of another 80s pop star, would have fit the role better. And it made me think of Cyndi Lauper, which then made me think of Vibes and kind of the similarities there of the kind of uptight guy, the uptight male lead who finds the, yang to his yin, and in this wacky out there female. I haven't seen Vibes, and I think it's been longer since that I've seen Vibes since the last time I saw Who's That Girl. But
did you have a conversation about this movie and Vibes with our brother Scott by any chance?
Well, only that I brought it up to him. That I
you
was
brought
like,
it up to him. Okay, so did he mention to you the conversation that he and I had? Okay,
he
so
did.
what happened was he asked me what we were doing next on the show, and I said, oh, we're doing Who's That Girl, the movie with, it's with Madonna. And he's like, is that the one? Is there some sort of like psychic or like supernatural thing? And I was like, no. And then I was like, are you thinking of Vibes? And he's like, yes, I was thinking of Vibes. And then he was like, is that the one? Is Jeff Goldblum in it? And I was like, that was Vibes. You're thinking of Vibes.
Also Vibes.
Yeah, also vibes. Yeah, so it was kind of a funny moment where I could follow his line of thinking exactly.
Right.
And, get down right to the root of it. So anyway.
He mentioned that, but it was almost independent of my watching it and thinking like, man, like how many other movies were there that were really like this? And I thought about like just 80s romantic comedies. Something Wild kind of. I mean, I haven't seen that one in a long time either, but
right. And I guess, if we're thinking about this era in filmmaking, especially this like kind of romantic comedy type of thing, we do get a lot of, this is a time where there's a lot of rock stars and musicians crossing over into other, forms of media. And I know that it happens a lot, but like,
I believe we covered Love Me Tender.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, but it was like, this was like another moment where it kind of like boosted a little bit. And, we talked about John Bon Jovi in Young Guns too. And, it's like there's this surge of musicians who just are clamoring to get in front of a camera.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a lot of that, more so in the 80s that, you think about the 70s and there's, David Bowie and Mick Jagger
Right.
and I'm Paul Simon and a lot of other pop stars, Diana Ross,
Yeah.
even Michael Jackson with The Wiz.
Right.
But but yes, in the 80s, it was really like and for a studio like Warner Brothers, which also had Madonna on their record label,
Right.
it was just such a no-brainer.
It was a marketing no-brainer, really.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, that the song, the soundtrack I had the soundtrack on cassette.
Right.
And I did not shoplift it from the Sam Goody or Musicland in the mall.
No, you did not. But Dan, that leads me to something else that I wasn't going to bring up, but now I am. One thing that you did shoplift from a local establishment was Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell 2.
Oh, we jumped, we cut straight to the chase.
The loaf.
Yes.
I wasn't even going to bring it up. I had completely forgotten, but you had mentioned shoplifting from Sam Goody.
It also came up with Scott. So in a different context, but it's okay. I think the statute of limitations on that has passed, and but yes, no, back in my days 30 years ago as a local CD thief, Bat Out of Hell was one of my conquests.
I thought it was Bat Out of Hell 2. Was it just Bat Out of Hell?
It was the original Bat Out of Hell.
Oh, it was the original.
Yes, okay. Bat Out of Hell 2 I ordered through the BMG.
Oh, boy.
Service. So I obtained that one legally, but no, the Bat Out of Hell, in fact,
legally,
I believe it's
but
the
in a
very
strange way.
Yes,
BMG.
yes, in a very, very 90s.
Very 90s way.
Very 90s way. But anyway, Who's That Girl? I had it on cassette in the summer of 1987. That song, there are a handful of songs that to me are just summer of 1987, but Madonna, Who's That Girl, along with the rest of the soundtrack,
right.
Including the guy who plays Raul, Cody Mundy, is on the soundtrack as well. I think he does the El Coco Loco.
Okay.
There's a lot of great, there's a Scritti Politti song, which I always enjoy, some good Scritti Politti. Hard to have a frown on your face when you're listening to Scritti Politti.
Okay,
and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, just go on your Spotify, find Scritti Politti, and you'll be smiling in no time.
There you go. Okay.
But yes, a wonderful soundtrack. And I hear Who's That Girl, and it takes me back, and it also takes me back to that time where movie soundtracks were such a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And summer of 87 was a big time for that. But yeah, it's a fun movie. It is. Oh, you know what? I have to bring up another coincidence.
Okay.
I'm big on the studio connections here today. So I was thinking about it and I was like, well, you know what? Warner Brothers also did Disorderlies the same summer. Another
it was the same summer.
A pop crossover, and kind of along the lines of the quote unquote snobs meet the slobs.
Right.
Which this is, to an extent. You've got that you've got the very upscale Scarsdale scenes, and you also have the kind of cartoonish, the cartoonishly criminal Harlem.
That's something that I wanted to bring up, is how racially out of touch this movie is. There's certainly this stigma that comes with the word Harlem that I feel like now is beginning to dissipate a little bit, but certainly in any type of like popular culture, when you say Harlem, it gets your mind directly to crime. And it's because of, African-American population in that area. And
Well, and
it gave me a really.
It's because of the not and like it's because also a lot of the sensational media, and especially unless you lived in New York in the 1980s, anything you saw coming out of there was especially about Harlem and the Bronx was drugs, it was crap, and like don't get me wrong, there's definitely a concentration of that in the city, but not. I would say not unlike any other city, and like also not unlike the suburbs. It's just more covered up in the suburbs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it really bothered me when that scene in Harlem comes up, and it's just like the car is being dismantled right in front of him. And
well, and there's also like there's cars on the side, and by the way, like the street is empty in the middle of the day, which anyone who's ever been to, I mean, God, almost any, well, I live in Seattle, and that you can see that in Seattle, but in New York, in Harlem, like it's not a quiet, like there's always people hanging out, but it's more like Die Hard with a Vengeance, and you know, where it is a neighborhood, and it's just it's a city neighborhood. And I mean, especially now, like it's a much more diverse population in Harlem. Yeah. So it's cartoonish. It's also kind of par for the course with movies pre 2000s.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like after that, I mean, it would be the same thing it's like the same thing with, you know, you could do the same thing with like St. Louis or Detroit, and the same stereotypes, the same stereotypical jokes. And that doesn't hold up as much. There is at the end I don't know, from a certain perspective. So the two cops at the end, they're and they are, by the way, they are, to make a Beverly Hills Cop reference, Taggart and Rosewood Light.
Very light.
So, but very much like that pair of cops, the more new agey younger cop, and like the grumpy older cop who has an awful diet. And at the end, they have all of this, tension throughout, and this is not out of nowhere. Like they do kind of build up to it, but at the end, they seemingly are in love, and which it's kind of like it's for 1987 progressive to a point, but then when you have the thug strapped to the top of the car, like making like vomity sounds, that's where it kind of falls into that 80s, like
totally gay panic. It's unnecessary and completely uncalled for, and ineffective and forgettable.
It's being done for the laugh. Like
it's being done for the laugh, and it's now it's a groan. You know, it probably got laughs at the time, but it is certainly a groan.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, it's kind of like almost there. Like when you say, and I knew it was coming, and
I had forgotten about that part.
No, I knew it was coming, because they have those moments like when they're bickering, and you have like when he gets him the new agey like salad to eat, and when he talks about like applying for a transfer to a different, get a different partner. I remembered it. I don't know that if I hadn't seen it before, I would have necessarily seen that coming, but it's just unnecessary. It's also like, these are two side characters, and they're there to basically like help some exposition and keep the stakes high and keep the chase going. Right. Keep the chase going.
You can't stay on Madonna and Griffin Dunne the entire time.
No, I mean, although, I liked their chemistry. I thought for two mismatched personalities, which I know is the point, they had a good, I think honestly, a lot of it speaks to both of their talent. I don't know if they had natural chemistry.
Right. And by the way, they're played by Robert Swan and Drew Pillsbury.
Yes. Thank you for noting it. Couple of other familiar faces that pop up earlier, that pop up early in the movie. One of them who I would say most people would know his face, but not his name. That would be Mike Starr, who he plays one of the dock workers, the one who really doesn't say anything. You would know him from, I think of him as like, he's an Ed Wood. He's the, isn't he like the owner of the B movie studio that like hires Ed Wood?
I think so.
Glenn or Glenda. Yeah. He's you know him if you saw him. I can't off the top of my head think of more. Goodfellas. He's the guy who works for Lufthansa security or the security at the airport and helps them
it's
pull
a
that off.
familiar character actor, you know.
And his coworker at the dock is none other than Mr. Stanley Tucci.
First on-screen role, maybe?
Is his first on-screen role?
I think something like that. First movie. I don't think he has any lines. He's just there.
Tucci speaks. Mike Starr does not.
Oh, Tucci does speak.
Tucci's the one who talks, yeah.
It's hard to remember. That was, but I want to give a shout out to somebody who's in this, Sean Sullivan. He plays the gun dealer who is, and he's incredible playing this very like twitchy guy. But people would recognize him as he played Phil in Wayne's World, the guy who is gonna spew. So he's just kind of one of their buddies.
I knew he looked familiar, but I didn't.
And also, Dan, he is in a certain movie called Ski Patrol as Suicide.
Oh, he's Suicide. Okay, great. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's Sean Sullivan.
Reckless snowboarder.
Yeah. And, some of the other people that we have Haviland Morris, who plays Wendy, Loudon's fiance.
She's really good.
She's so good, who we learned throughout the movie that seems to like to sleep with cab drivers.
Has a thing for cab drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like... That's another gag that, like, I don't know. I guess I couldn't really judge how well it's aged, but it's one of the things that I associate with this movie. And
really,
I laughed.
Oh yeah, I had her in my cab.
I mean, it's a bit that builds really nicely.
Yeah.
I love when any friend of Wendy's.
Yeah.
Now, you, Wendy Worthington? Nah, she's not your type.
Right.
I had her in the cab. Well, just because you gave her a ride. I didn't say I gave her a ride. I said I had her in the cab. I love her. And then the Rastafarian.
Right.
And then, of course, he's like that same old guy that you always see pop up on sitcoms in the 80s and movies who says something witty and cute and funny and, oh, this is the Worthington place.
Right. Yeah.
It's great.
I do have to call out one moment of the movie that I really, really liked. And it's just to set things up a little bit. Wendy and all the bridesmaids get kidnapped because it's their wedding day. And they're kind of just like hanging out of the back of a car or whatever. And you just go to this one scene where it's just these like motorcycle cops sitting around having a chat about not being able to meet women. And some of the guys are like, I'm just so tired of the bar scene. And it's just like, I even got so desperate, I tried a dating service. And, just like, it's just these cops talking about how their love lives are, just like in shambles and stuff.
But in like a very open and sensitive way.
Open and sensitive way. And then this car drives by with these women bundled together.
Sticking out of the sunroof.
It's so good. That moment I really liked. So however that had to come about, I enjoyed that.
No, that was really good.
The sincerity with which they said those lines was just amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was really... And then there's just some weird, random, bizarre stuff, like with the tiger and Montgomery Bell, the wealthy...
Right, the client.
Guy, he bought up a city block and built a rainforest on the roof and has some, like... I don't know. He gets a little bit, I don't know, sex trafficking. I don't know. He's got a woman living up there.
Yes.
On the roof, which one of the other reviews I saw on Letterboxd was like, what's with the crazy jungle lady that lives on the roof? Who's that girl?
Oh,
Good point. She just kind of comes out of nowhere and leads him off. But you know, it's funny. It doesn't. I'm making light of something I shouldn't make light of.
no.
But,
Yeah, I get it.
It does not. Yeah, it does not come off. It doesn't come off like that, and it's a really nice scene, and it's a scene.
It's a very bizarre scene.
It's a very bizarre scene. It's also a scene that kind of allows Madonna to drop the, you know, the cartoonish, like the Julie Holiday act for a little bit, and you know, just kind of show a little bit more depth and range to her character. So there's a lot of fun in this movie. There's there's definitely some weirdness. And
To say the least.
And it's very goofy, but like there's some great running. The car horn running gag.
Oh yeah,
the start spreading the news car horn that eventually just like the car just collapses. I don't know if you got a chance, but when Mr. Worthington is going over the prenup with Loudon, he flips several pages, and they all say like the only words I could make out were capital punishment.
Oh God. Yeah, the prenup is fascinating. There's a lot of illustrations in it of things that he is not allowed to do, things that Wendy could only be seen doing in a cab, probably.
Right.
And it's just very silly. And I mean, big ups to Griffin Dunn and to Madonna for, you know, going for it. And it's memorable. I'm sure that anybody else who grew up with it in the same way that we did at least remembers it in some sort of way. It was a movie that when the aforementioned brother Scott of ours, you know, when I mentioned it to him, he was like, I've never seen it. And I was like, trust me, you've seen it. Like if you started watching it, you'd be like, oh my God, it's all coming back to me. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Scott is
not like us.
Scott is on record as having the largest collection of pizza boxes in the known universe, and therefore had to clear out some room in his brain. The type of room that John and I use for, you know, this type of thing. So, but yeah, it made an impression. It's a movie that really stands out in my mind really clearly, and that I really enjoyed watching. And you know, it was like I was kind of thinking like, because it's not streaming anywhere, and you have to either rent it or just buy a digital copy. And I think there was a $5 difference between the two, and I definitely thought to myself, I might plunk down the extra $5 to you know, have this to watch you know, beyond the next 48 hours, but which I didn't. But honestly, it's the type
I
of
can't
thing
see
I'd watch
myself
again.
watching it ever again, to be honest. Yeah, but that leads me to a question, Dan.
Oh yeah,
if you were to bring it back these days to maybe watch something in that ilk again, what would you do?
I'd remake the shit out of this.
Okay.
I would, and I just kind of threw to get, like, there's some jokes, like, imagine, he's got that alarm watch that goes off every time he's got a new appointment. So imagine that with a smartphone, and how much more, like, you just amp that up. You could easily drop, like, you don't need to keep everything. You could change a lot about it. You could swap the genders. You could do all sorts of things with it. You could take out you could leave in the stuff that, I mean, hell, leave in the I had her in the cab, I had her in the Uber, whatever, update it. So you could, you know, you could do that. You could take out the stuff that didn't work. You could focus on the stuff that did work. I was thinking about names to throw into this, and I was just kind of spitballing, but I thought as a modern day Loudon, I thought Kumail Nanjiani would be could pull that off, no sweat. I thought Charlie Day was another one that kind of popped into mind. I thought as Nikki, Aquafina would be a funny Nikki.
Aquafina would be a really fun Nikki.
Aquafina would be a great Nikki. I thought like if you were trying to remake this also with the idea of saying like let's put a star in it. I know so little about her, but like maybe a Billie Eilish, like this seems like the type of thing I could see her doing.
Like Miley Cyrus.
Act a Miley Cyrus, definitely could do this. We know she acts. So yeah, those were just a few of the names that I thought about. And I think it's really just, it's about those two. And I mean, otherwise you're not necessarily like, it's not like Who's That Girl was the first time this had been done. I mean,
no,
it's a nod to old, like, screwball romantic comedies.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So why not bring it back? But I also like I would like the idea of if we're going to remake, like a very 80s romantic comedy, I would like it remade kind of like it was still the 80s.
Right.
A lot of nice cuts. I would, maybe this time do some work in post to make sure that the bus ride from New York to Philly doesn't look like it's going through Southern California.
I know. Yeah. I picked up on that too.
You just see all the mountains and the sunset in the background. You're like, that's Southern California. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Dan, I would actually go sequel. I would say, all these years later, I'd love to revisit Madonna and Griffin Dunne. Griffin Dunne, who had recently been on Succession. He did a little pop-up role in Succession. And I think that it could be the kind of thing where it's like, they've both kind of become more uptight. Madonna has, certainly wavered back and forth on, her persona a lot lately, but I feel like she'd be really good. When's the last time we saw her in a movie?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Die Another Day? I don't know. And she was just in it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If that. So would you have it be, I'm sorry, you're probably not done.
Yeah. So, and then maybe somebody from like her past comes back, like something from her past comes back to haunt her. And, and it kind of forces them to have to kind of get out and go on some sort of crazy day-long adventure.
Like find their wild side again.
Yeah.
I like that. You could, I mean, I know it's kind of cliche. You could always do like, they have a kid and the kid ends up in some situation and then or the kid's the wild one.
Right. Yeah.
Are we bringing back the tiger?
Oh, there's got to be some sort of animal. I mean, certainly Murray is off doing other things or nothing at all. I don't know the lifespan of such a creature.
Yeah,
but
no, probably nothing at all.
Yeah, probably nothing at all.
More accurate there.
So,
I'm looking up to see when the last movie Madonna was in, and she's got so many soundtrack credits. IMDb makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. But yes, that's what I would do. I would remake it. I would even be down for like some remakes of the soundtrack, even a straight up like soundtrack remake, like track by track, different
bands.
That's
fun.
I mean, like that's the whole thing with this movie.
Yeah.
It was such a cross promotional thing. Why not? Why not do a whole? And I mean, I know it's a bit too late, but it's celebrating its 35th anniversary this year.
That's right.
So it would be fun. This could be like an HBO Max thing. It doesn't have to be. Yeah, but it would be a fun summer. It would be a fun summer movie to watch.
Yeah. Well,
I'd be down for it.
Dan, the rest of this month, what we've been doing in order to indicate what the next movie is going to be is something that we weren't really able to do on this one. What we were doing is we were trying to sneak in cleverly the title of the movie or derivations thereof throughout the episode to get people guessing.
Yeah, we were pretty silent on that. And when we didn't, you know what though, because some things that we didn't talk about in that silence, a couple of things that we didn't cover is how much this movie is about going on the lam.
That's right. Yeah. Dan, why don't you tell everybody about our next month of movies and what we're going to be starting off with?
So next month we're switching the direction of the lowercase letter in February. The lowercase b, we're making it a D. It's going to be February, and we're doing movies that involve the FBI. There is FBI involved, and we mean the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not female body investigators or full-blooded Italians. But this movies.
Dan, have you been to the Jersey Shore recently? T-shirt
I needed
stands.
some t-shirts. And yeah, no. So we're going to kick off February with a movie that celebrated its 30th anniversary last February.
Yeah.
And that would be the Academy Award winning thriller Silence of the Lambs.
Right. And that's going to be a complicated one because there are so many other movies and TV shows that follow along that legacy. It itself is a sequel, right?
Well, yeah. So, we'll get into this, and I'm sure we'll touch on the other ones. We're gonna focus our efforts here on Silence of the Lambs. That does not mean you will not hear talk of Hannibal, either the film or the television
series.
Program, Red Dragon, Manhunter, two adaptations of the same book, Hannibal Rising.
Yeah.
So on and so forth.
Right. Well, Dan, as you are zipping around town in a Rolls Royce trying to get a woman and a tiger where they're supposed to be, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey, John, and no tricks.